Okay. So thank you again for joining us for our Career Pathway panel on the public sector. I'm so happy to have some of our alumni here, some lovely people. And what we're going to do, just to explain the time, is we're going to start with some structured questions and then move on to some time for you all to ask your questions. So hold on to those questions. You're welcome to put them into the chat if you need to just put them somewhere for now. And then we can spend some time at the very end of the panel to answer those questions. So first off, I'm going to let folks introduce themselves, and I'm going to start off with Cameron.
Hello, everyone. My name's Cameron Yonan. I use they, them pronouns, and I currently work for the City of Seattle and the Seattle Legislative Department for the Seattle City Council.
Christina.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Cristina Narvaez. My pronouns are she, her, and I currently work at the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. Should I pop it? Hailey? Haley?
Hi everyone, my name is Haley King. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently a policy analyst at the Washington State Department of Health.
Hi, everyone. My name is Damien. I am currently a budget advisor with Seattle Public Schools, and my pronouns are he, him.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here virtually. Um, my first question for you is, could you share with us a little bit about how you began to work in the public sector and maybe a little bit of why as well, and how you got to your current position? If anyone wants to start.
I can go. So I currently work at an agency that regulates public utilities, which are privately owned. And it is kind of like a intersection of it is a public agency, but I work a lot with the private sector and nonprofits also. And that's what I wanted to do. I landed a job in the public sector, but I was not looking specifically in the public sector. What I was focused was on the description of the role, that it was something that had to do with energy policy, that it was something to do with interaction with the private sector, the public sector, and civil society through policy. And that's how I ended up working here, just because it was the best fit for me. But it was not the only thing I was looking for. I was more focused, as I said, in the job description than a specific agency within the government.
I can go after Christina. I previously, before Evans, I worked in a clinical research setting. So I in college, I was pre-med. I majored in bio. And then throughout that time working in clinical research, I was working with a lot of regulatory agencies like the IRB and the NIH and some grant stuff too. And then that job quickly made me quite frustrated in like the roadblocks and these holes I was seeing. And then just on the other side of that, I just wanted more to have a role or a hand in the policy side to change rules and regulations. And I became much more interested in that side of the work than my work. So that's how I kind of transitioned into coming to Evans and working in policy. So my initial goal was really to get into like working in health policy, and I somehow ended up here. But yeah, and then I can popcorn it over to Cameron.
Yeah. So funny enough, my first public sector job was a Wisconsin State Capitol tour guide, where I gave tours of the state capitol. And I got to spend, as you might guess, a lot of time around legislators and their staff. It's something that was really exciting to me. So I ended up interning with like the governor's office in Wisconsin and then a couple different legislative offices throughout the Wisconsin State Senate. And I ended up at Evans and I did a great internship with the Seattle City Council. And so I kind of stuck around on the council side. But yeah, I would say I really am interested in like the legislative affairs aspect of it all. So I'll popcorn to Damien.
Sure, yeah. Working for Seattle Public Schools was kind of like a natural fit from my previous career in education or my previous job in education, which was as a school teacher. I taught in Philadelphia Public Schools, and if you've heard anything about Philadelphia Public Schools or have seen the show Abbott Elementary, they've been facing a lot of financial challenges, and I felt pretty motivated to kind of dig into the financial side of education. I was really seeing how the limitations, the financial constraints, and limitations that from revenue for the school district affected the classroom. So I went to the Evans School, and I ended up in this position I just reached out to someone at Seattle Public Schools in the budget office, and I said, hey, tell me more about your work. And she said, you know, keep your eyes posted on our hiring page because this is great timing. In a couple of weeks, we may have an opening. So that's how I ended up here.
I'd love to ask you, I know that some of you shared a little bit about maybe some internships or some stuff that you worked on prior, but what experiences best prepared you for your current work? Was it an internship you did while you were at Evans? Was it a particular class you took? Was there just a huge moment of realization where stuff clicked? I'd love to know, what do you feel like best prepared you for your current role?
I can start this one. The first and obvious one is I was a teacher, which was an important bit of background experience for working in a school district. But the two other things that really helped prepare me were an internship I did with the state legislature in their Office of Program Research. That's they do policy analysis and support for the House legislative committees. And they have an internship which may or may not be continuing if you're interested in something like that. And the complexity of the research that I had to do for that job and dealing with that learning curve was really helpful for my current role. And in the interview, they were very interested in that. So it was clear that that role was helpful. The other thing that was really helpful for preparing me were the budgeting and finance classes at Evans. So I would say if you think you're interested in a particular career or field, take as many classes as you can while you're at Evans. And I'll pass it over to Christina.
Thank you, Danny. I think, well, my background in general was dealing or working in economic development. And in economic development, I worked a lot with state, local, and US federal government, also with other governments from different regions. And that's something that I was able to pull from my background into the narrative about how I would be a good fit for the current role. Another thing that helped me a lot was because my background was not in energy, but rather energy adjacent, I had to kind of like prove that I had some energy knowledge and experience. And so I would second Damien when he says that taking classes as a that would help you build that subject matter expertise is super helpful. So take energy classes, energy policy or environmental, and be mindful of the narrative that you can construct with that and your background. And the third thing that helped me a lot was the capstone. I chose my capstone project like when I was able to rank it and signal which I wanted to work on based on the experience that I wanted to gain, regardless of other factors like who you want to work or what is the easiest one. And it ended up being challenging, like very, very challenging, but it paid off. And I was able to put that in my resume as a additional experience that would add to my energy policy background. And so don't disregard that capstone project. Cameron?
Yeah, I guess I'll flip the script on the first two speakers. I specialized in international development at Evans and did that certificate program. And I obviously did not end up there. I currently work in domestic politics. And I think the most important thing I learned from just like Evans was just to be nimble. Like Evans core like curriculum really prepares you for almost any government sector job. The basics like budgeting, but also like knowing how to build stakeholder groups, and just kind of like have those conversations. Specifically, I found my work in like nonprofit and organizing to be particularly helpful in this career because like government's about relations, and I think it's really important that like as you go into government jobs, you know how to talk to the people you want to meet with constituent wise, but also like other departments and like other like city and state agencies too. Um, but yeah, other Evans classes wise, I took legislative relations with Matt Stewart. So a shout out for that one. And I'll popcorn it daily.
Um, I will echo all of all of my speakers' thoughts. My work is currently a lot of reading and writing very technical documents, especially during legislative session, which is going on right now. I work on a lot of bills and drafting rule language, like the Washington Administrative Code language, which can be very technical and tedious. So I really credit my classes in policy analysis and others that strengthened just my writing and like critical analysis skills. I think those prepped me very well. I think back to especially advanced policy analysis. And the professor's name is eluding me right now, but I really liked him. um, and yeah, so I would echo taking the classes that you are interested in that will strengthen those core skills that are required in the jobs that you're interested in. But on the flip side, I think it's also important to cast a wide net, like what Cameron just kind of said. In my job, in my state job right now, it's like I really appreciate all the budgeting classes I took in Evans because that helps me understand the state budget is very, very complicated. And everyone that works in state like policy to some degree is you're kind of expected to know how to read it and digest it and be able to talk about it, even if your job isn't related to budget at all. The budget just affects your job, period. So I'm so glad I took the budgeting classes that I did because number one, that I still use those Excel skills in my job, and number two, it just helps you understand parts of a job that you might not have even thought that you needed the skills for. Um, yeah, Rachel, back over to you.
I have a quick question to go off of that because I think you all kind of discussed a little bit of your background and sounds like budgeting is just helpful all around. Finance, numbers. I am not one of those people, so I can see how helpful that is. Are there particular skills that you feel like you're using the most right now in your current job? Where if you were to say interview again or put it on your resume and you're like, these are the top skills that I currently am working on, um, what might those be?
I could kick it off with what I do in legislative land. Policy analysis. I've got a policy portfolio. It's my job to track committees, go to committees, watch committees, look at all the bills and legislation before that committee, and come up with a recommendation for my member on if she should vote for it or not, right? So if you can't read and understand what the bill is doing, you might not be able to give the best advice. So being able to give that analysis on multiple levels around equity and like financially and stuff, I've found pretty helpful and I'm willing to say for any city council based jobs here in Seattle, like it's a skill you will be asked and expected to perform.
I can go next. For me, it's a lot of actually a lot of data stuff. So think kind of similar vein to what we learned in like quantitative analysis classes. And I think I'm lucky in that my work really wants to foster those skills, but I've kind of learned that if you want to move ahead and diversify your skills, at least as a policy analyst for the state, having a really good grasp on understanding data, or like being able to distill data, under like explain it to a broad audience, and then taking it a step further, helping visualize the data. Those are all really, I think that's something that I'm trying to work on right now. Yeah, and I'll popcorn it over to Christina.
Thanks. I think, yes, being able to add and subtract and being able to read and write basically sums it up. But I will add more specific in the read and writing world is how do you process what you read and how you translate it into accessible communication tools, whether it is a memo or it is an email. Make it as easy as possible for somebody who has to make a decision to make that decision. So translate complex matters into very digestible, accessible information. It's a hell of a skill. And then when it comes to data, data visualization will take you to the next level, definitely. Whether you have the ability to understand, I don't know, medians and averages and all these kind of that I can't clearly. Uh, but if you can put it in a very simple chart or in a very simple, I don't know, axis visualization that will summarize a paragraph into one chart, that will be a great ability or a great skill to highlight in your cover letter.
Um, echoing what everyone has said, all of that has been true for me. I will also say, I do a very technical, my work is very technical. It's very numbers focused. I work in a budget office. Um, and when I was preparing for the interviews, like I had spent hours and hours and hours getting ready to talk about my Excel skills, all of the big financial models that we built for some of the Evans classes. And they asked me very few technical questions. And most of their questions were about how to navigate organizational dynamics, and how to be like understanding. They were trying to gauge how well I understood the role of a budget advisor in a big organization, and especially in an organization where people have lots of strong feelings about the decisions that the organization makes. Um, so I would say that's a thing that I've been working on. I mean, I think I have the skills and they did too. They hired me, but it's a thing that I've been working on, and I think is important. And I think is something that if you're looking for a technical job, is valuable and something you should sell, even if they don't ask about it in the interview. Um, because I think organizations with, people doing technical jobs, but who are able to navigate organizational dynamics, it's very valuable to bring that to a team.
Segueing off of that, the big question, how do you get a job? How did you get this job? I'd love to hear about either how did you find yourself in this current role? What was hard about that job search? Because as many of the folks that are in this room are looking for jobs or will be looking for jobs. And as we know, the job market is hard right now. It has been. And if you want to wrap up that thought with a good piece of advice that you wish you received. So there's a couple questions there you can kind of pick and choose.
I can start us off on this one. My personal experience job searching after I graduated was I cast quite a wide net, and this might not be true for everyone. It was just true for me. Although health policy is why I initially went to graduate school for, I found during my time at Evans, I found a lot of topics in social policy and even public finance very interesting. So I was applying to like housing policy roles, like budget offices, like legislative roles. So I kind of I tried my best to not pigeonhole myself into the roles that seem the most interesting. And I think a part of that is I would one of my advice, one of the great pieces of advice I received was that you always have something to learn and to just stay really humble. And so even a role that might not seem super attractive, you probably have something to learn from it. So I kind of took that and just started applying to a lot of things where I felt that my skills at least overlapped a little bit with what the job description was asking for. Um, I think the most challenging part is definitely the uncertainty. Like, and I think that's true for everyone. The pressure of like stepping into a full-time role after doing school full-time was also scary and daunting. That's just like a complete, almost like lifestyle shift. Um, yeah, and then I think for the people who are also okay casting a wide net. A piece of advice I would give is to have tailored resumes for like different role types. Like I had one for like policy analyst, and then I had one for like community engagement, and then I had one for like legislative stuff. And so I honestly think that kind of landed me my role here because my manager initially when she was talking about it, she said that she really liked how I highlighted my previous experience in like health systems, and she could tell that I really understood it. And I think I really didn't. Obviously, I do now, but I think my resume had a really good like hand in how I landed the role. So, yeah, sorry, that was a long tangent, but I'll pass it over to you, Damien.
I have so many pieces of advice, having done grad school twice, and having changed careers several times. But I think probably the most important thing I want to say is that every single job that I've gotten, with one exception, I had talked to someone at the organization first. That doesn't mean talking to someone is enough to get a job, but it means if you want a job somewhere, I think you have to have at least talked to someone there first. Um, and there's a couple benefits from this that I think are easy to discount when you just hear people talking about networking. One is it gives you an opportunity to suss out the organization because you may think the organization is a great fit for you. You know, their website may say all these great things, and then you meet with them and you discover that, oh, this role actually wouldn't be exactly what I want to do. Maybe the organizational dynamics aren't something I would mesh well with, that kind of thing. Um, it's also less pressure than a job interview, and it's a great opportunity to make a good impression on them. And even if they don't have a job for you, they can point you in the direction of someone else who they think might have a position, or someone else who they know works at an organization that does more of the thing that you're looking for. The one exception for the job that I got where I didn't know someone was for this internship that I mentioned with the state legislature, and they knew the Evans School. So, and like it was, only for graduate interns. So the pool was much less competitive. And I think every time I've had to do job applications and going through this process, I want to pull my hair out every time I just send a resume off into the void of some application portal on a job posting. And I just got so sick of that. And I was like, forget this. I'm only going to apply to places where I've talked to people and had a chance to see whether I like them and they like me. Um, Now, if you're anything like me, 5, maybe 10 years ago, anytime someone said the word networking, you rolled your eyes. What I want to tell you is networking doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be transactional. What I think you should do is look up organizations that seem like they do cool work, find someone whose title seems like they could tell you something about that work, and just go ask them questions. Go be curious. Go show your passion and your curiosity. Um, don't go to like, show off this is my resume, I'd be a great fit, but like just go and learn more about what they're doing. And if they have an opening, great. If they'll have an opening soon, great. If they don't have an opening, then they'll point you to someone who might. Um, so that's kind of my number one bit of advice. Sorry, I took up so much time with this answer. Um, I would say also that the navigating the uncertainty is also not to be underestimated. Um, Finding a job is just a process of like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. Suddenly it's over. So just, take care of yourself, do what you have to do, to stay positive. Um, and I'll pass it to Cameron.
Yeah, to kind of start on that note, I think the most challenging part of the job search was that I put out like hundreds of applications. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, is my degree not good enough? Is my background, am I not framing things right? And I think, especially in this job market, we need to like take it away from a moral failing or like a personal failing and realize that the system is broken right now and like things are messed up. So just to start there, and then to echo like what some of my other panelists have really said, I got this job because I was an intern here and like someone quit, right? Like I like knew the people. I had good relations with other council members, and so I was kind of able to like office hop because they knew me and I knew my character, they knew my work ethic, and so like I was able to be really lucky. But I think the hardest part is like you can't apply to every single job on government jobs, which I did for months. But it's truly like having people know you and like know your character. I went to a lot of like queer networking events, which was like something that was really impactful for me, especially to know like who isn't a safe trans employer, right? Like those are things that like matter to me in taking care of myself in a workplace. So if you can find spaces like that, I found those to be particularly helpful and not just like getting the job and the right title, but like somewhere where I could like actually grow and succeed and be safe. So depending on like how you identify and stuff, I think that's a worthy aim to look at too. So Christina, have you gone yet?
No, thank you.
Christina.
I don't, yeah, I think everybody has touched very important points. And um, okay, so one piece of advice that really took the pressure out of me and put it more like in a perspective, because I was also kind of like going desperate. I took the summer off, thinking that jobs would just rain for me after the summer, and then nothing. I started applying like seriously by maybe September, and it was December, and I was like, I would land some interviews, I would go all the way to like the almost last step, and then they would go with somebody who had more experience in energy, or they would be like, I don't know, more of a better fit in any other way. So that was getting very frustrated. And one of the advice that I got was to cast a wider net when I was applying, and kind of like don't let my preconceived ideas of whatever position I was applying to um, dominate me. Rather go, as Haley said, with um, humble yeah, like approach in terms of like I can learn, I can connect with people. And then somebody said to me, your first job out of grad school is not going to be the last one. So you can always either leverage that experience that you're getting in that particular role, or the people that you connect with, and get another one afterwards, because it's fairly, I'm not gonna say it's easy. It's never easy to land a job, but it's fairly less stressful to get a different job once you are employed and when you have an income than when you're fresh out of grad school, probably like stressed with like debt or something, like something similar. So that was one thing that I wanted to highlight. And then the other thing that I did was also talking to people in places where they had openings, but also in general networking. And networking is not my thing as a cultural thing. Like in Colombia, we don't know how to network. And also in Colombia, I am part of like a very privileged group. And so I didn't have to network as much because my resume would speak by itself. Like I graduated from known schools and universities. Here, where is Colombia? Where is my experience of 10 years in Colombia can apply here? Who can vouch for me? And in that regard, talking to people was very helpful and actually asking questions about what is the most important skill that you consider would be successful for somebody in your role. So really asking the details about how to be successful, how to do well in the role, even if you're not applying for a similar role or if you're not applying for that particular agency or organization, you will start collecting and you will start seeing the patterns of what is important for you to highlight in your resume or in your cover letter or during the interview, but what are the particular skills that people in that area, in that industry are looking. So that will help you construe a narrative or get the language, get the, especially if you're pivoting from a different industry into a new industry, you will get that knowledge as if you were part of the industry already, and that will give you a lot of confidence. And then the other thing that I wanted to say was, um, even if you are working in an in internship where you know it's not going to be, like the forever job, or you don't want to continue there, give it your 100 as much as you can, because those contacts will be your references, especially if you're coming from abroad, from other country or from other region in the US and you don't have a name here in Seattle or in Washington in general. These former employees or your supervisors will be your references and they will vouch for you. They will be your sponsors. They will promote you with with the person who is talking about or making inquiries about whether you should be hired for that position. And that happened to me. My former boss in Washington, D.C., I credit her me having this role because they called her and they asked like Cristina doesn't have direct experience in energy other than like her grad school and what she's done in the capstone project. Do you think she will be able to pull it off? And my boss was like, oh, of course, I hired her because she has this and that skills, and this is what she's going to do. And she never let me hanging. So be aware that your former or your current supervisors can be the person who will give you that last, the last nudge for you to move forward. I think we all went in
Yeah.
the answer.
Thank you all so much for everything you shared. I think each of you are coming from different experiences and different places, and I think that variety is really helpful for everyone to hear from. I'm going to pivot us to being open to questions from anybody that is here. So any of the students, alumni, if anybody has questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask it out loud. Or if you'd prefer not to, you're welcome to put it in the chat and I can go ahead and read it out loud for folks. I do have one question to start with. So you all can noodle on this as I read this one out loud. Specific question for Damien, or I guess if other folks have thoughts as well. How do you reach out to people? Any tips specifically on networking? How do you make people willing to respond to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's tough. I wish I could say there was one tip that worked better than all others or some secret trick to it. I would say try to contact people by email. If you can find someone's email address on their website or through some Google sleuthing, you might have to do some Google tricks to find an email address. I think that has worked better than trying to message through other platforms because it seems more personal. Um, More generally, I think reach out to people that you're genuinely curious about their work and interested in what they do. Um, you know, you might have only a mild curiosity, but the point the point is, at least for me, I'll just speak for myself. If it was someone that I was genuinely curious to talk to, it took a lot of the pressure off. And I felt way less awkward about, meeting this person and asking them about their work because I was genuinely curious. And it's just sort of like, well, I really do want to know, I'm not, it helped take away sort of this thing that would happen in the back of my head. Like, am I asking the right questions? Am I making a good impression? It's more like, no, I just want to talk to this person. I'm curious about what they do. And if this other stuff happens, which I really hope it does, I'm at least more relaxed and I'm making a better impression now. Um, LinkedIn was a little bit useful in a couple cases when I couldn't find. I think I used I'll put in a plug for the Evans School LinkedIn group. Because you can, for the people who are on there, a lot of times you can see where they're working. And that was a nice introduction in the subsequent email that I sent to them was, hey, I saw you're an Evans alum. I'm currently an Evans student. I'd love to learn more about what you do. Do you have time for me to come and chat with you? Yeah, I don't know if anyone else wanted to respond to that one.
I could pitch a quick one really quick. Um, when I do informational interviews, I like always pitch them as like on LinkedIn. But when I'd wrap up, I'd be like, who are two other people that you are like inspired by in the field that you know, and then can you connect them with me? So it's not just like give me names, but more like, will you facilitate an introduction? And having someone who actually knows both of us facilitate an introduction was much more helpful in my opinion than like cold calling, because obviously they know you now and then the person they're introducing you to. So I think that helps put a personal touch on it. Not that LinkedIn doesn't work, but yeah, if you have anyone who could like connect you as a bridge would be pretty helpful there.
I just also wanted to put a plug for what Damien said about like using your Evans connections, because I have gotten a couple like emails from like Evans students wanting like an informational interview. And then I think as a student, I also sought after like Evans students. So I would say like if the organization or the department that you're interested in um, has a LinkedIn and you can look through those people, like look for the people that had like went to Evans. And I feel like more often than not, like our alumni is more than willing to talk to you compared to just other people.
Yeah, to jump in really quick, the Seattle City Council, we have 14 Evans MPA alumni on our floor, and that's just on the second floor. That doesn't include the mayor's office or any city departments. So like especially if you're looking for something local, there's quite a few Evans grads around.
Okay, moving on to this other question, also for Damien, or anyone else that might be able to share some thoughts. Um, any of you that have experienced a shift from on the floor or direct in the field work to a more policy or administrative role, how has that transition shifted your perspective? And has it had any impact on your personal philosophy, mission in the department you work in?
I'm happy to start with that. I will say, as you can imagine, if you haven't thought about this before, if you're a teacher in an underfunded school district faced every day with the really intense needs of the people that you're trying to serve, or maybe you're like a social worker, or you work with veterans, or you work in housing and you work with unhoused people, like for people in those positions, it's very easy to be very angry at the people who work in the more administrative roles of that organization or agency. Um, but I think like before I was teaching, I'd had enough policy experience that in the back of my mind, I was sort of like, I'm sure there's a reason. I may not agree with the reason, but I'm sure there's a reason for why things are the way they are with this agency or why they're making these decisions. So that was sort of a way to, I don't know, diffuse some of that anger or frustration. Now that I'm in this role, um, I think that has been vindicated. The answer is always it's complicated, and there's lots of stakeholders who have lots of opinions, and sometimes that influences why the organization does what it does. Um, so I suppose I would say it has affirmed my belief that If you work in a big agency that does frustrating things, you should give people some grace, try to give the organization grace, and then start doing some research to try to understand the situation, because the situation is always more complicated than it seems from the outside. I don't know if anyone else has worked in a related situation and wants to share.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from Jordan.
This is a question for Cameron. You'd mentioned that there was a number of Evans graduate alumni in your place of work. Can you elaborate on what roles you find these people filling? If you knew anyone who started processing, what approaches they took in order to get the foot in the door, so to speak, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would say we've got a fair number of Evans MPA alumni here. We're all legislative assistants. That's our like legal government title. But we all kind of specialize from there. I'm a district director, so I do constituents and policy. But other LAs on the floor are like district directors or some are policy directors. So it really depends on like seniority or like where they get hired for a role. How they got feet in the door, a lot of folks worked either in smaller localities, so they like worked for Shoreline or like Redmond or something for smaller government first, and then came to Seattle, or they came from the flip side of like departments. So like a King County department or a City of Seattle department from like SDOT to then here and then use that subject matter expertise to become a policy director here. For example, my policy director for my office worked for Seattle City Light, SPU, utilities, worked for SDOT, worked for Department of Neighborhoods, worked for two different mayor administrations, and now she's like working in council office. So went to Evans, but like worked a whole bunch of just like other city of Seattle stuff to kind of work around. But there's also people who are LAs here that came straight from like the advocacy world who ran campaigns and then ran like 4 or 5 campaigns and then just started working here. So I wouldn't say there's a single pathway to the Seattle City Council by any means, but finding ways to make connections and then getting involved early and jumping on those postings early and then reaching out to LAs who work here.
Thank you.
I want to add something to Cameron. There is an internship that runs annually. It's a fellowship actually in the city of Seattle, of Shoreline, and it's called the City of
Is it the
Shoreline.
CMO one?
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
I did it and I can't forget, I can't believe I forgot the name, but it was the fellowship that worked at the city of the office of the city manager of Shoreline. And that's another way that you can go. You can have a fellowship, not directly in the council, but in an office that works with the council. And I constantly was presenting or preparing information or documents that would go to council. And I would see all the process that would go both for policy or for bills. And it was very interesting, and that was another way that you could go. I don't know if it's open now, and I don't know if it's or if it was closed, but I'm happy to help in any way.
Thank you.
I think I see another question specifically about resumes. How long did folks spend tailoring their resumes? And how many roles did you apply to per month? Kind of specific.
I can start this one. It's hard to quantify like how much time I spent tailoring it, but I did tailor my resume to each role. I kind of viewed it as like chipping away at it. Like the resume got kind of better and better every time I applied for a role. And so I think for me it was nice that my resume could evolve into something better rather than just having something like really different for each role. Um, it's also hard to quantify how many roles I applied per month, but I think I was like what Cameron said, I was just on government jobs. I was on like City of Redmond, like all these other cities around me, and just checking it every day and like making a list of the things I wanted to apply for. And government jobs, the portal actually makes it pretty easy for you to like save the ones you're interested in. but I don't know, maybe like 100 in the beginning. I think definitely like 50 to 100.
I did keep track of all the applications and also kept track of the networking coffee chats and outreach that I did. And in terms of applications, my number was 97. From what I said, like September to December. So maybe like what, 35 per month. And my time for it's pretty similar to what Haley said. Like my heavy lift was to prepare the different resumes for the different like kind of like fields that I was applying to, because I was also interested in tech policy and then the energy field. So I had these two resumes ready to go, but then when I was getting ready to apply, it was just a little tweak. And what I would do was just read the job descriptions and then read the main tasks or the main responsibilities and kind of like try to match or try to include in the my experience description, not my title, but what I accomplished in each position, the words that they were looking for so that it was like easier for them to understand what I did. Um, but keep it honest, like I was never trying to make it as a makeup. But that was my little tip. Cameron, I saw you nodding. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I had three different versions of my resume. I had one for legislative, I had one for policy, and then I do, well, like one for international development. Um, and especially for governmentjobs.com, shameless shout out, you could really go to town on like writing up things in government jobs because they have you re-type it in anyway on government jobs, right? And so for my first couple, like 40 applications or so, I just kind of like left them the same for every single one. But then I realized you could actually edit them for every single one. And so I kind of really, my resume like largely had those three iterations, but where I actually made a lot of the tailoring was in the government job specific application. And what we see on the back end and like City Seattle side is we don't really like print off your resumes first. Like the first things we're seeing is the governmentjobs.com handoffs, right? So if you're just kind of like phoning it on that, like that's not going to be our first look. Internally, it's going to be your government jobs profile. So here's my plug is just to really like take some time to be intentional and not like rehashing it every time, but specifically adding some of those keywords like Christina said, to still making those postings match that government jobs profile. I found to be particularly helpful.
I will put in a plug for using Rachel as much as possible. And I apologize, Rachel, if you're about to get a bunch more work, but Rachel was instrumental in me getting my current job because she helped a lot with my cover letter and resume. Um, I sent way fewer applications than it sounds like the rest of the panel did. But in lieu of that, I spent a lot of time scheduling as many informational interviews as I could. Um, that means fewer than the number of applications you can send out if you're just sending applications onto portals, but it still felt very busy. I was trying to juggle a full-time internship, and a lot of other things. So my number is lower, but it felt like a lot. I think I averaged around 2 to 3 a week, starting in January of my second year of the MPA program until probably May, when or no, June, when I was doing interviews for my current job. Um, and so I would echo what everyone else has said about the resumes, and I would also say, start doing informational interviews now, because it takes a while to do, as Cameron said, and ask people to connect you to others. That can take a while. People are busy, they can't meet with you. They'll answer you, but they can't meet with you for another 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. Um, so yeah, just start the process now and um, you'll be ahead of the game.
Thank you all. Um, I think I'm going to ask one last question to close us out. Because it is a really hard season in the world and a difficult time to job search on top of all of that, what might be a piece of encouragement that you'd like to leave folks with?
I'm gonna go first because I have to hop on to a ledge meeting. Um, but I really want to echo what Cameron said before about um, job searching and not hearing back, and the process is not a moral failure. And if you need to sit with that heaviness, sit with it because I think everyone in the panel, we probably did, and we were disappointed and we kicked our feet, and it sucks. But ultimately, it's just so out of control. It's not up to us. It's it's not anything about you. So um, I think. I think that helps you move forward. Again, cast a wide net. There's a lot that you can learn. I've learned so much from this job was not my perfect dream job that I want to stay at forever, but I've learned so much in the year I've been here. Um, I kind of came in thinking, oh, I have all the skills that I need because I went to grad school for this, but it's just not. I learned so much. Uh, I will say lastly, the state of Washington really likes Evans grads. That's how I got hired here. My team of 10 policy analysts, four of us are Evans grads. Like one person came in and my manager was like, "Wow, you're really great. Let me hire another one." Then let me hire another one, and then let me hire another one. So use the Evans names. Diversify your job listing portals. Don't just rely on one. I was going to like 5 to 10 different portals because like not every job is going to be listed on everywhere. So that's what I will say. And then thank you guys for having me here. I really appreciate it. Please reach out to me if any of you here wants to talk further. I'm really happy to make the time. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Haley.
I want to echo what Haley said about using the Evans name. There are 9 people in Seattle Public Schools budget office. 7 of them are Evans grads. Um, and at the Office of Program Research with the state legislature, I would say about a third of the people in a 100-person office were Evans grads. Um, so make sure you lean on that when you're talking to people, and also use the resources in the career office and alumni networks. Um, and yes, echoing that it's not a moral failure uh, is very important. And like just accepting that it's a terrible process, I think is just helpful. Just to be like, yeah, this is just awful. But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's just an awful process. And all you can do is your best. So you just have to keep doing your best.
Yeah, I could go next. I think job hunting is a team sport, right? I think a lot of us try to go it alone and just kind of like muscle through application after application. But it is truly about like you leaning on your personal and professional networks, especially since job hunting does take an emotional toll. It's really important for you to take care of yourself in a variety of ways, just not professionally for sure. So do reach out to like your professors want to talk to you and help you, right? Like your TAs. I was a TA and I was more than happy to talk with like students about like how to get out there. Like Rachel's a great resource, but like this is truly a team sport. So make sure to like bounce things off your like, colleagues and like classmates and stuff too, because we're all kind of in the same boat for the most of it. So yeah, reach out to your networks and your friends and take care of yourselves for sure.
I agree with everything they've said. In my team, I think everyone but a couple are not from Evans, and so that's very funny. And in terms of what Cameron just said about being a team sport, it absolutely is. Leaning in your professors, for me, it was Craig Thomas, and it was also Matt Stewart. Leaning in your former supervisors for references, for advice on how to navigate different situations, how to navigate interviews. Rachel, I'm sure you could do mock interviews if you are nervous. And I think all that kind of like hand holding that I got was crucial for me not to crash under the pressure because it is, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's very, it takes a toll in your mind. And then another element of job hunting being a team sport is also leaning with your colleagues and your friends at school. What we did was we would meet together at a cafe or somebody's house, and we were just applying together, or we would just like share and laugh and cry certain experiences, or how our interview didn't go well at all, how we were insecure and we stuttered and said the wrong thing, and then we were laughing about it or crying about it, and we process things. And so it is just knowing that it is an awful process. I don't know why it's an awful process and nobody does anything about it, but it has been, and for what I've heard, it continues to be a horrible process. And so just know that you're not alone, that it is not you, and that you can share that experience with your community to build that support.
Great. Thank you
Can
all.
I add one more thing real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
What Christina was saying just reminded me that it can be easy the longer you're in the process to start to undervalue yourself and your skills and what you can contribute. In fact, for this current job, I found out that one of my Evans classmates also made it to the final round of interviews. And I like felt like she was smarter than me. She would be better at this job than me. And they ended up picking me. So and she also has a wonderful job now too. So like, you know, A, it all worked out for us, but B, don't let the process take away from what you see as your own value and worth. And you are, have some, make sure to keep the faith in yourself, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you all for your encouragement. I know that we all need it out here. So thank you for being here. And thank you, students, for also being here. Feel free to reach out to me for appointments and we can talk through stuff, and we're happy to support. But thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Goodbye.
Yeah.